Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. And we have the lovely Rehana Rossouw to talk to us about predator politics. Welcome to the program, Rehana. What a pleasure to have you here.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me.
My head was spinning when I started reading this book. And I see your two previous books. Obviously, the one was a family saga, and the other one started delving into politics during the tenure of the late Nelson Mandela. What made you decide to write this book? Like I said to you, my head was spinning when I started reading this book, and I just kind of wonder your frame of mind once the book was actually finished and ready for publication.
Those are brilliant questions. Thank you. My publisher approached me to write the book. I had up until now considered myself to be a fiction writer, not a non-fiction writer. I was a journalist for 30 years. So I had thought that I was moving into a new field. But in August last year, my publisher called and asked if I'd be interested in writing this book about Fred Daniel, who was a conservationist who owned 89 farms in Mpumalanga and had been subjected to massive political corruption and intimidation. And I thought about it for a few minutes and I said, yes. That's how it started.
How long did it take you? Look, I should imagine, apart from all the information that Fred provided you, and I love the writing style. It's almost like you're talking in the first person. I kind of had to stop myself from time to time to think, is this Rehana talking or is this Fred talking? But be that is may beautifully written. How much of material was provided? I should imagine all of the material was provided by Fred, but obviously you needed to have to wade through all of this, make sense of it, and then put it in a way that would make sense to the readers.
So the book was, we planned the book to coincide with Fred's damages case against more than 20 politicians, government officials, government organizations, which was due to be held in the North Gauteng High Court in August. It was postponed. Fred was ready for this trial to begin. The government said they weren't ready, particularly Didi Mabuza's lawyers said that they weren't ready to defend themselves in that trial. There was a huge amount of material. We're talking about 15 years of corruption and harassment which Fred Daniel faced in Mpumalanga. But I started my journalism career covering courts. I really enjoyed covering courts because that's where you find human stories a lot of the time. There's always a person behind a claim. So I think it was easy for me to wade through all these court papers. I had to look at 15 court cases which Fred had already won against government officials and politicians, and then get it into the book. I did write it very fast. I wrote a whole lot more than what is in the book. I think the book is about a third of the material that I originally gave to my publisher.
And how much of collaboration happened between you and Fred? I understand that you got lots of the material from court papers, but your collaboration with Fred, I should imagine a wonderful relationship ensued during the writing of this book.
It was a wonderful relationship. It's difficult as well. Fred has, because of the ordeals that he faced, including death threats to himself, his wife, and his young son, Fred is obsessed. He's determined. He's going to win this case. He wants to win this case. At the very least, he wants to put his information out in the public and for people to judge whether or not this political harassment actually happened in Mpumalanga. Because I'd been a political reporter for most of my career, I knew the history of corruption in Mpumalanga. I had been working at the Mail and Guardian in 1995 when allegations of corruption first came out in Mpumalanga. So I was aware of the background. I don't think Fred understood the politics as well as he needed to in order to protect his business and his project. I think I understood the project. It's something that I'd been working on for many, many years.
We know that, by way of what I've read of the book, that death threats were made on Fred and his family. Whilst you were commissioned to write the book, obviously, the key role players, Didi Mabuza, etc., all of those people, were they aware that you were writing the book, and were you at any point threatened or possibly afraid that some harm may come to you and your family?
Everybody's asking me that question. No, I was not threatened.
I'm one brave lady, that's all I can say.
There's very little in my book that's new. There is very little. I drew heavily on reportage that had been done by other journalists. Everything in the book had been reported already. There's no new bombshell allegation in there. We all knew what was happening in Mpumalanga. We all knew how Didi Mabuza rose to power in the ANC and now in the government. It's not new. I find it so amazing that people have forgotten a whole lot of corruption in South Africa, a whole lot of corruption that led to the death of dreams for very many poor Black people. We forgot how those dreams were stolen. So what surprised me is the fact that all of this had been happening for years, and we all kind of forgot what was happening in Mpumalanga as we watched bigger scandals unfold around the country.
And that's where my next question leads me to, is the state capture issue, Gupta Gate, and the SAA saga. Well, just about everything that's going down or has gone down in our country. Having written this book, and this is kind of almost the start of where political corruption and greedy land grabbers, etc. It's almost like this was the stepping stone. This is where the foundation was laid. And people just started getting greedier and greedier and greedier, and realized that there's a lot of money to be made this way, sadly, at the expense of the poor masses of our country and the taxpayers like yourself and I.
Exactly. And what happened in Mpumalanga that makes it a little bit different from the rest of the country was that after 1994, after the ANC won the elections in Mpumalanga, a whole lot of homeland officials were brought into the ANC government in Mpumalanga. A whole lot of people who had been fingered in corruption in Kangwane already were brought into the government in Mpumalanga. There was one of the first scandals in the province was the transfer of land from the old Kangwane homeland to Kangwane leaders. They basically were gifted farms. It was terrible. It was terrible. After Matthew Sposa, the first ANC premier, was removed from the list, the ANC decided that a former homeland official would be the next premier in Mpumalanga. And as we all know, before 1990, the homelands were among the most corrupt parts of the country. And that corruption just moved seamlessly from Kangwane into the ANC government in Mpumalanga after 1994. And everybody watched it happening, and very few people did anything about it.
Are there any clean politicians? Question number one. And who is this book targeted at? I mean, we're now still reeling from state capture, Gupta Gate, etc. And what you also say in the book is that the majority of the people that you mention in the book, all these corrupt officials, corrupt politicians, etc., very few of them actually were prosecuted.
Yes. Yes.
So it left me feeling quite, as I said, reeling, but so disheartened and discouraged, and left me with a question, is there hope for this country going forward? Because every day newer and newer and newer scandals seems to be uncovered.
I think there is hope. Firstly, let me start there. There is hope for this country. I think the National Prosecuting Authority under the leadership of Sean Abrams failed to bring to court cases that were ready to prosecute. I think that's a given. You look at the new leadership of the NPA that Cyril Ramaphosa appointed last year, and they've suddenly been able to move on with prosecutions which just went silent for many years. The former Minister of State Security, Bongani Bongo, appeared in court 2 weeks ago on corruption charges relating to land in Mpumalanga. Ace Magashule is appearing in court on Friday. That would never have happened under Sean Abrams' leadership of the NPA. I think they are finally they have finally appointed the right people at the NPA, and I think we're going to hopefully see a lot more prosecutions for corruption.
Rehana, you have been a political and a court reporter for many, many years, journalist, I beg your pardon. Is enough being done to prosecute these people? Is the taxpayer, is the country going to be able to recoup all of those losses, or parts, or as much of the losses as we possibly can get our hands on? Not only predator politics, not only what's happened in Mpumalanga, but plus is one of the most beautiful parts of the world. Yeah. And it truly broke my heart to read about all of the shenanigans that went on there. Probably still going on, I don't know. Yeah. But, you know, is there a chance, is there anything that South African politicians or the South African government and other key role players, people like Paul O'Sullivan, whom you mentioned in your book, you know, forensic investigators like him, can we bring these people to book? Can we freeze their assets? Can we make them pay back the money that was raped, you know, from South Africa and poor taxpayers?
The asset forfeiture unit does work very closely with the National Prosecuting Authority, and we've seen a gold Bentley, a couple of Ferraris, some Lamborghinis, a couple of mansions being seized after people appeared in court to face charges of corruption. Of course, if they are acquitted, all of those luxury vehicles and luxury homes will have to be you know, restored to them. I think the asset forfeiture unit does do a very good job. But for me, the issue is my book deals with stolen land from the poorest Black people in Mpumalanga, people who had been promised a better life, people who had actually been restored to their land through the government's Land Claims Commission. Several thousand people had been restored their land in Mpumalanga. And then it was stolen again from them by corrupt politicians. These people still have the land. They still have access to the land. They need to be given support so that they can make a living out of their land. That's what Fred Daniel wanted to do. Fred bought 89 farms between Badplaas and Barberton, and his intention was to conserve the land, but also build up an ecotourism business so that he could create jobs in one of the poorest and, as you say, most beautiful parts of South Africa. But greedy politicians swooped in to take the land, not from Fred, but from his poor Black neighbors who had historic claims to their land, who were being, who had actually found justice after the theft of their land in apartheid. And now we have ANC politicians stealing from those people. That's what shocked me the most. It wasn't that, you know, a millionaire white businessman moved into the area and they didn't succeed in stealing his land. It was that a wealthy white businessman had moved into the area and was shocked by what he found. He was shocked at how greedy politicians were attempting to make money out of land claims.
And I suppose these greedy, land-grabbing, corrupt politicians and officials justified what they were doing, because here again, they probably feel he's a white millionaire, he's white, we suffered under the whites during the apartheid era, so we are justified in doing what we're doing, which obviously is not the right way of thinking, but be that as it may. I know that, having, as I was going through the book, Fred comes across as a very honest, an honest person who is trying to do the best, not only for the poorest of the poor, but he had his eye on the ball as far as ecology and the environment is concerned, which going back that many years, 10, 20 years ago, was commendable, because people were just kind of waking up to that fact that we need to conserve these precious resources of ours. So he had his heart in the right place. He even tried to create a partnership with the Kersners, who saw that he had a very solid dream and this could be very, very workable. And just imagine if that would have been realized. Just imagine, as I speak with you this morning, what a gem, a tourist, an amazing world-class tourist attraction we would have been sitting with in Mpumalanga. And just imagine all of those tourist dollars coming in. And just imagine where the people of that area, Mpumalanga, the poorest of the poor, how their living standards would have obviously elevated through this dream being realized. But a few greedy officials destroy that dream.
They haven't destroyed the dream. That's the good news. So Fred is still hoping that the North Gauteng High Court will hear his damages claim for 1 billion rand, which is how his lawyers have calculated the loss, because the losses do include a 7-star luxury lodge, which was planned to be built on his land, which would have secured the land for the benefit of people concerned about climate change and interested in the scientific history of life on Earth. That land is still there. Fred has told the court in no uncertain terms that he's less interested in the 1 billion rand in quantified damages. He would just like his land to be restored. He would like the Mpumalanga government to assure him in a court of law that they are prepared to work in terms of the law to help build his project, and he's hoping to return to Mpumalanga one day to continue. So he's told the court that all he's interested in right now is a finding that the government had interfered and on the behalf of corrupt politicians to ensure his business failed. He wants to go back. He wants to build his dream. I think he's going to get there. He's not looking for people to pray.
He sounds like an absolutely remarkable man. And you wonder, how many more Freds are out there trying to do the right thing by their communities and by the country. But having said that, is he not putting, his life has been threatened in the past, so has his son and his wife's lives been threatened. And that's the reason why, fast forward to the end of your book, they've relocated and they're trying to, I suppose, like you say, his dream is still alive, but his focus is elsewhere for now. Yeah. But should the court rule in his favor and he goes back to Mpumalanga, those corrupt officials are still there. That element of corruption is rife throughout the country. Is he not putting his life at risk? And is he not going to start this whole roller coaster all over again?
Well, one of the most senior politicians named in his court case is Didi Mabuza. He has left Mpumalanga, is now in the Union Buildings in Pretoria. He still owns a farm close to Fred's farm. Didi Mabuza owns a farm in Barberton, and I'm sure he returns there regularly. But he's supposed to be in Pretoria right now. Right. Several of the other officials who assisted Didi Mabuza in stymieing Fred's dreams have retired. The one who was in charge of issuing permits for conservation in Mpumalanga himself faced death threats, and he was retired with stress. I mean, he was too stressed to continue his work, and he is now supporting Fred's court case. There's a lot of officials in Mpumalanga who performed Didi Mabuza's dirty deeds and who are now prepared to testify for Fred in his court case. I think it's easy for us to say that corruption is supported by everybody. And what Fred discovered in Mpumalanga is that there are a lot of officials who really meant to do their work, but their good work was subverted by predator politics. A lot of officials basically just followed orders, which is what people do every day when they go to work anywhere.
Because if they don't, they lose their livelihood. They threatened, they lose, like you mentioned, I think it was Fasagi, who said that he was going to lose his pension as well.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, you are threatened, and then I guess it's human instinct that you want to protect yourself and your loved ones, and you then just go along and become corrupt in the interim as well.
But worse than that, I mean, my book records 22 instances of political assassination in Mpumalanga. Yes. And it's the assassination of senior ANC leaders who spoke out against corruption. Everybody was at risk in Mpumalanga. As soon as they blew the whistle, you know, people disappeared. People were scared to talk about corruption there.
Who should read this book, Rehana?
Every South African who is concerned about the person who is possibly going to be the next president of the country. Every South African who's concerned about climate change. Every South African who's concerned about preserving the environment. And every South African who's concerned about preserving our history. I mean, on Fred's land is evidence of the first life on earth. This is not ordinary land that politicians are attempting to grab. This is land that is of huge scientific importance around the world.
Yeah, I should imagine very similar to Cradle of Humankind.
Much bigger than Cradle of Humankind.
Okay.
Much bigger. It's got the evidence of the first life on Earth. It's got the evidence of the first ocean on Earth. It's got the evidence of the first tides on Earth. It's got the evidence of atmospheric changes on Earth. It is one of the most important scientific spots for geologists around the world. This is the land that politicians try to steal.
Let's look at the forensic investigator, O'Sullivan. He was stymied as well. I mean, I followed him for several years a little while ago. He had lots and lots of airtime with Talk Radio 702. And I truly admired the man because he's a whistleblower, or at the time was a whistleblower in the true sense of the word. And then he went under the radar for quite a while. I should imagine that was because perhaps threats were made on his life.
He was arrested on a plane, dragged off a plane.
Right. He was going back to Ireland or something to that effect? Right.
Yeah.
All right. How big a role did he play as far as predator politics is concerned, or in assisting Fred in terms of, doing forensics, auditing, and telling Fred what exactly or how exactly things are playing out as far as financials, etc., is concerned?
For the 15 years that Fred's project was blocked by politicians and officials in Mpumalanga, he had no idea what the motive was until he discovered a report that had been done by Paul O'Sullivan for the Mpumalanga Parks Board, the Parks Agency, which is charged with ensuring that conservation projects in Mpumalanga succeed, such as Fred's project. Fred had no idea. Paul O'Sullivan was appointed by the Parks Agency because its CEO was aware that there was so much corruption in the agency. Paul investigated. He wrote a report. He gave it to the CEO. And the only outcome...
Fired. The CEO was subsequently fired. Am I right?
Fired. That was the only outcome of Paul O'Sullivan's report, which found widespread corruption in the agency. And most tragic, that parks agency officials were issuing hunting licenses to slaughter the animals on these game farms that they are supposed to be protecting on behalf of all South Africans. They were issuing hunting licenses, the animals were being slaughtered, and they were pocketing the funds. Paul is now laid charges. Paul is laid charges in Mpumalanga.
All of this is contained in the book. So I urge every South African to go out, buy the book, read it, understand what's going on in our country, and perhaps collectively as civil society, we can make our voices heard. What has Fred said about the book to you, Rehana?
It was all very nervy near the end. The book came out in a mad rush. We kept having to update it as there was new developments, as it was on its way to the printer. Fred, I think, would have liked a lot more about himself and his project in the book. I've kind of spent a lot of time looking at the politics behind the issues that Fred was facing, but he's ecstatic. He keeps sending me WhatsApps from people who are saying they're reading the book and enjoying the book. He is ecstatic. Really
all right, this interview will be podcast, so you make sure that you get it to him as well. I should imagine there's a sequel to this book. There has to be.
Oh, Julie, really, the book that I gave to my publisher was about 4 times longer than the copy that you have in front of you, because I kept being distracted by other scandals in Mpumalanga. So I'm looking at Didi Mabuza in the education department, and there's probably 5,000 pages on corruption in the education department that I had to take out.
You do allude to that in the book as well, don't you?
Allude, but all the details gone, all the details gone. So I think this is, in the end, I think it was the correct decision by my publisher to focus just on corruption involving land reform, where Fred is involved. There's a whole lot of more corruption in Mpumalanga.
Okay. Let me just show the book, the cover of the book, to our viewers and listeners. This is what it looks like. Please go out, buy the book. You'll be supporting an amazing cause. You'll be actually protecting yourself as a taxpayer if we can obviously prosecute all of these people and regain the monies. How do you see the current political scenario playing out with all of the other corrupt issues that we're hearing about on an ongoing basis? There's not a day that goes by when the headlines is not screaming out at us about some corrupt official or some corrupt deal. Every day something new is being unfolded.
This is going to sound very strange, but this is how I feel. I write between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. That's when my brain works. So all 3 of my books were written in the early hours of the morning. When I finished writing it and I submitted it to my publisher, I was still keeping those hours. So I switched over to Trump. And I've been watching Donald Trump very closely until 4 o'clock in the morning for months now. Last night when Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation, it was so normal. It was so intelligent. He was so compared
makes
to Trump.
Makes you proud to be South African.
Well, boring president. Yes, but in my house, when we wake up, the Zondo Commission plays all day long.
Okay.
So I have been following the Zondo Commission as well. I think Judge Zondo did a good job. We'll get there.
I need to get you back again on the show to discuss your previous books, and also just to pick your brain, your amazing brain, on what's going down in South African politics. But just to digress here, you brought it up. I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts. You've alluded to it, but just, say it out loud. The shenanigans, the ridiculous situation that's happening in a first world country, which is supposed to be the most democratic country in the world. The way that man is behaving, you think he's running a banana republic.
He is running a banana republic, and it's not, America said it was the foremost democracy in the world. I think very few people around the world considered America to be the foremost democracy. It's so strange now that Trump is disputing the results and refusing to concede, people are using the word coup. And then Americans get all excited about, the possibility of there being a coup in America, while the rest of the world tweets long lists of countries where America has funded coups, where American soldiers came in and removed governments. I mean, I never thought that America is the foremost democracy in the world. A nation founded on...
They talk about the American dream and condition the world to think that they are the foremost democratic country in the world. We're going to have to leave it there. I absolutely loved talking to you. Your final words on predator politics.
Julia, I absolutely love talking to you as well. Thank you very much. My final word on predator politics is read it. Read it. I think it's an optimistic book. I know it brings out a lot of corruption, but it also shows how people are fighting against corruption in South Africa and that there are people who won't give up. I left the book optimistic. I hope other readers do too.
Well, thank you indeed for those words of hope. Yes, even though initially it left me reeling and spinning, it ended off on a high note of hope. Good on you. Regards to Fred, and look forward to chatting to you again in the near future. Salaam alaikum.
Thank you. Alaikum salam. Thank you.
There you have it. An amazing lady, Rehana Rossouw, talking to us about her book, Predator Politics. Go out, get it. Understand what's happening in our country. There were quite a few other questions I needed to ask her about land reform in this day and age. Which political party is going to make it happen without any corrupt practices in place? But perhaps we leave that for a later interview. It's exactly 11:39. Thank you for watching our first interview of the morning. And don't go away. We're going to be chatting lots more with lots more amazing guests on the show.